What is good, my ex-homies? It is your boy Jacob Gooden, and we are back for another week of the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. I got a special episode for you today because recently I've noticed there's been kind of this theme in some conversations I've been having behind the scenes as I'm prepping some cool guests that are coming on the show. And they've turned around a lot of the questions that I ask them on me and been wondering, like, Jacob, tell us about your homeschool experience. And I know I've sprinkled it in a few episodes here or there. I've done a few episodes where it has been me mostly talking, but maybe on a specific subject of my homeschool experience. So today I figured, you know what? I'm just gonna run down the list of questions that I normally ask you guys about your homeschool experience, and I'm gonna turn them on myself, and we'll see how this goes. But before we get into that, I've got a quick favor to ask, and that is I want you on my email newsletter. Okay, so top link in the description is going to be a sign up sheet to get on my newsletter. I send it out every 2 weeks, just about. I've been a little inconsistent, but I'm back. I'm back on the grind. Every 2 weeks, an email. It's got the latest episodes with a little breakdown about them. It's got whatever I'm currently reading, some of the things I'm watching, tools I find, promotion for stuff that cool homeschool people are doing, like music they're putting out, or movies or YouTube videos, all kinds of different stuff. Okay. It is, I don't know, it's just been kind of a fun secondary outlet to this podcast, and I would love to have you on there. So, like I said, link is in the description. Go sign up. It costs you nothing. Okay, now let's get on with the episode. So let's kick things off with kind of the quick and dirty, the elevator pitch, if you will, of my homeschool experience. Okay. I started homeschooling when I was in second grade. So I did a few years of public school before that. But second grade, it was me and my sister. She went all the way kindergarten through 12th grade. But yeah, very much like a private homeschool education experience. It was Christian homeschool experience. And yeah, in Southern California we were involved in a ton of co-ops. I know socialization was like a very important thing and to my mom. She did not want us to be the unsocialized homeschool stereotype. And so we were definitely involved a lot in co-ops and just with other homeschool families and even like other church families and things like that. So they did a good job trying to get us out of the house, I think. And the overall, my takeaway from my homeschool experience, I enjoyed it. Okay. I liked it. I don't look back on it with too much distaste or disdain. It got me where I needed to go. I think, of course, there's holes in my education that maybe could have been done better. There's changes that I personally make from the perspective of who I am today. But overall, I think it got me to where I needed to go. Got me into college, which got me the skills I needed to do my career today. So, overall, good experience. I don't have that much to complain about, if you will. But before I go on, I do want to quickly like touch on the different types of homeschooling, quote unquote, right? Because I think there's some kind of, I have a lot of different people on, and when we ask them about their education experience, it varies, right? And we've had people who have done more charter school type stuff, who have done the private homeschool thing. I haven't had any unschooling people, but maybe we'll get there. Road schooling, there's a lot of different paths you can go. So my family fell under the private homeschooling umbrella category, whatever you want to call it, which basically means that my parents were in charge of everything. There was no funding from the state. There was no funding from the government in any shape or form when it came to my schooling. They picked all of the curriculum. They did all of the research for it. They did all of the record keeping, all these types of things. And then they had to submit whatever they needed to submit to the California government to make sure that, I wasn't going to get taken away for like child neglect or something like that. But I know this also varies state to state. Every state is different. California tends to have a little bit more lax rules when it comes to that kind of stuff. But essentially, we were a private school operating out of our house. Okay. That's the best way to describe it, I think. Now, there's also public and charter school situations where it's a lot of like online teaching or virtual teaching. Back in the day, probably was like cassettes and DVDs. But yeah, so at home learning, but with the schooling of like a public school. Okay. So These are sometimes state funded or government funded, so they can be a little bit less expensive, um, but you're sacrificing that aspect of like choosing every piece of the curriculum that your child uses during their school experience. And then lastly, the other major category that gets talked about is unschooling. And I'll be honest, I don't know that much about it. I'm learning some about it, but essentially unschooling is this idea, this philosophy that we teach kids based on the things that they show an interest in. Okay. And that goes for everything. So when they want to learn how to read, that's when we teach them how to read. When they want to learn how to do math, that's when we teach them how to math. And so it's very much a child driven education. Now, I think my experience with homeschool lended itself to my parents had guidelines and rules that they were like, okay, we know that we want to get our kid through these levels of math and these levels of English, and he needs to be able to read at a certain level and all these types of things. They also did a good job of leaning into the things that we were interested in. I've talked a lot on the show about being really into the history of pirates, and I remember buying a bunch of books about it, had coloring books, and all kinds of different things to learn about the history of pirates. And, that very much was catered to me. It was catered to my education style and need in the same way, like as time went on. I mean, I remember one year my mom handing us a list of books, and she had decided, hey, you're going to read these 6 books, but you get to pick out 5 from this list that you get to read. And so there was kind of a mix of things going on there. And that was, I think, what set my homeschool experience kind of apart from some other people was like, even though my parents made a lot of the decisions, my sister and I also got some say in what was working, what wasn't working, and things we were interested in. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the curriculum I used because I was thinking about this. And for the most part, once we found what was working, we really stuck with it. Okay. So those first couple years of school, when we were getting our bearings, so second grade, probably second, third, maybe fourth grade was like a Becca, pretty much everything. And man, oh man, it just did not work. It just wasn't it for my family. And I don't even, it's been so long at this point. I was 8 years old when we started homeschooling. I'm 29 now, so 20 years ago. I just remember it really not working. But once we started to find things like we found Matthew C. And if you don't know what Matthew C is, I highly encourage you to go look it up. But it's like building blocks, and you learn how to do math based off of blocks, which as a kid who grew up playing with Legos, right up my alley. It made sense. It clicked in my brain, and I was able to like actually progress through math pretty quickly and at like a normal speed. Like I was on par with everybody. And for my sister, it's the same deal. Like she thrived with the Matthew C stuff. That's not to say there wasn't challenging aspects of it. It just was the thing that worked for us. Okay. So Matthew C, absolute like gold standard favorite. What's interesting, I'll get into the religious aspect of the curriculum in a minute. But so some other things that we looked at. So we did exploring creation for science. I think that was primarily high school science. I don't remember. I feel like there was another curriculum maybe in like late grade school, junior high times that we used. But most of our science was all like a science or a Christian based science type thing. But I do remember that exploring creation, I remember taking a few things that I feel like were pretty solid. Like when I was in college and took science classes, I was like, oh, I know this pretty well. And so overall, like I said, I think it did its job. It wasn't maybe the greatest, but it did its job. It got me where I needed to go. History, we did this thing called Story of the World. And I'm trying to think of how to describe this, but they were these little books, and they almost look like thick novels. And we would read them, and I remember them being pretty good storytelling, like books. And then, if I remember correctly, my mom would pair them with. We read a lot of like historical fiction and some biographies and things like that. But so let me give you an example. So, for instance, when we learned about like Lewis and Clark, the expedition of Lewis and Clark, We read, in addition to reading our history book, we read a book about Sacagawea, and it was historical fiction, but it painted the picture so beautifully, and it was such a great novel to read, like as a companion piece to this, because it was written from her perspective, and being with these strange men that she was getting to know but couldn't totally communicate with, and even some of the villages that they went to, and meeting other like American Native American tribes and things like that, and her struggle with knowing the languages. It was interesting. It was like a wonderful piece of history. Now, what's cool about the Story of the World curriculum was that we also did it with a couple other families. And so we had kind of this co-op thing going, and we would get together once a month, maybe every 2 weeks, something like that. I don't think it was every week, but it definitely was fairly regularly. And we would do some kind of like, I'm gonna call it a craft, but like an activity together. Okay, so for instance, we at some point in our history learned something about Australia, and there was something in the book about boomerangs, and so we got together and we built boomerangs, and we went to the park and played with boomerangs. It was dumb. It was little kid stuff, but it was so cool to be able to do that with other kids as opposed to just like my sister and I making them at home and then having nobody to play with them. That was what made that co-op so special, was that it was like a play date mixed with school. And so we would get to do some fun activity. Like I said, I was really into pirates. So when we studied a lot of exploration, right, and discovery of the new world, very much in an era of pirates, and we would make hardtack, and we made some kind of like, beer or something, because they couldn't taking water with them was a little bit dangerous because it could get contaminated, but alcohol was a safer bet. Funny enough. But anyway, Story of the World, I don't know. I haven't done enough research into it to know totally like the accuracy or inaccuracy of those textbooks, but I do remember them being super fun. Okay. Next up, Rod and Staff English. Okay. I pulled this up last night as I was prepping for to record this episode. So this was a Mennonite based education system. So Rod and Staff, big brand. They have a lot of different categories of curriculum under them, right? All the different subjects. And we specifically used it for English and learning to write papers and stuff. It's funny because on the website, there's a huge emphasis on like the Bible and the Mennonite church and those kinds of things. But as I'm looking back again, think it's 20 years at this point of when I would have used this. I don't remember it being super religious in that aspect, but these books were, I don't know, they were these cute little hardbacks with, it almost was like a Fun with Dick and Jane picture on the front. And I remember them, yeah, I remember them reading them and learning like sentence structure and learning how to put together a paper. They taught me how to address an envelope, all those kinds of things, all the basics of what I needed to know how to do English, essentially. And then once I got to junior high, we started up with Mrs. Yip's writing class. And man, oh man, I gotta say, she saved my butt so much in college, okay? This woman, she would walk us through, I mean, all types of different writing, right? From creative writing to doing a research paper to when I was doing high school stuff with her, she was teaching us how to write college entrance essays and things like that. But I remember, I will never forget, she gave us these lists of sentence openers. I saved that. And when I was in college, I taped it to my wall. So when I would write my essays in college, it was just right there, ready for me at any, whenever I needed it. Okay. And oh my gosh, her class, she knew how to balance the fun and the serious. Okay. Cause obviously we're there to get things done. We can't just goof off the entire time. But she made writing into kind of, it felt like a game at times, like I said, with sentence structure and like the sentence openers, but also the way she would talk about, okay, so there's all these different types of sentences, and here's how you do this, and here's how you avoid run-on sentences, and all these types of things. What was cool was then she started giving us guidelines to say, okay, you're going to write a paper, and here's all of the requirements for the paper. It has to have however many adjectives, this many adverbs, this many nouns, all of these things, this many sentence openers, this many prepositions, all those types of things. So it became like a game of like, how many of these things can we check off? And what's so funny is that I was thinking about this as the other day because one of the podcasts that I work on, I also manage their blog. And while I don't do most of the writing for the blog, I do some of the editing for it. But one of the funny things about publishing things on the internet is SEO. And if you don't know what SEO is, it's search engine optimization, okay? And so our blog has this tool on it that is, it's like it's a search engine, it's an SEO optimizer type thing. And what it'll do is it ranks you based on how well you've done. So you pick keywords. So for instance, this podcast, one of the big keywords would be homeschool kids, right? Homeschool would be a big one. Ex-evangelical is probably a big one. Homeschool education, all these different things, okay? So you would pick your keyword. Now what's cool about this tool on these blog sites is it gives you kind of a ranking. So you've got green is good, right? Yellow is, it's kind of mid. And red is, this is really bad, okay? But it has all these different things, and it talks about all these keywords. It talks about your sentence structure, all these things. And it's like that game that I used to play with Mrs. Yip of just like, how many of these things can we fit in? And how many of these things can we get to go green? And I remember in a private conversation with Mrs. Yip years and years and years ago, as I was prepping for college, she told me, she's like, look, I pushed you to do all of these things. That doesn't mean that those things make great writing, okay? And you don't need to always do all of them all the time. But it was an exercise to get you to at least use them and know how to use them properly. And that's, again, I'm still using that kind of a skill in what I'm doing today. So anyway, I've talked enough about English. Let's move on. Spanish, Rosetta Stone, okay? I'm going to say this was a weak spot in my education because I think I would have definitely benefited from going to a class and learning Spanish with other students. Rosetta Stone, I'm sure it's probably a lot better now than it was then, but oh my gosh, I had this headset that I would wear with a microphone, and then it was a computer program, and so a lot of it was they would say a sentence or a word or something like that, and you'd say it back, and it would use, computer knowledge to tell you if it was good or bad, okay? And I just wasn't good at it. It did not teach me conversational Spanish, which is honestly what I probably kind of needed, which is hilarious because I'm a quarter Hispanic. So I can order food and I can count my numbers, but that's about it. Okay, I can't really hold a conversation very well. So definitely a weak spot, I think, in the homeschool education arena. But yeah, so okay, so in researching all these textbooks and looking all these things up, I was curious at the percentage of them being like a Christian curriculum versus a secular curriculum, those kinds of things. Because my family, we bought a lot of our curriculum. We would go to the Chia Convention, and the Chia Convention was like a Christian home educator association conference, I think, is what it stood for. And essentially it was like a lot of teaching. They would do some classes for students about, I don't even remember, but I know for parents it would be about, they would have some of these people who created these curriculums come in and talk about them. And then they had a big vendor room and you could go buy your curriculum for the year. And so I was just wondering percentage wise. And so as I was researching this, I would argue 90% of the textbooks that I used were Christian based. That's not to say that some of them, like Matthew C., for instance, math, I'm sure there's some curriculums out there that somehow really finagle the story of Jesus into them. But Matthew C. very cut and dry of like, we're here to talk about numbers and numbers only. Kind of on that borderline of like, it is a Christian company, but not a Christian curriculum per se. So we've talked a lot on this podcast, okay, with other people about the good and the bad of being raised in a Christian environment, a Christian homeschool environment where that is all you ever know. There's something to be said about the lack. I understand one of the big reasons that parents homeschool their kids is to control what is going in, and there is a fear among parents, especially Christian parents, that when a kid goes off to public school, they're being fed lies about the beginning of the world, evolution, Darwinism, those types of things. That was a big emphasis, at least when I was younger. And so a lot of my friends, myself included, were forced fed science that was a young earth creationism, a lot of Ken Ham esqueness to it, a lot of Ken Ham teaching, to be honest. And yeah, and given these talking points of like, no, here's like the truth, without ever being given the opposite side of that. What is evolution? What are these people saying? And what do I believe? Where is the evidence for these things? Ken Ham can talk a good talk. I'll give him that. Okay. I listened to a couple of his uh, talks recently because I was doing some research for something else I was doing, and I was like, man, he's still kind of got this charisma that I appreciate, and he speaks with very much an authority of what he knows, of what he thinks he knows. He's talking about. The reality is, though, that when you go to his website, oh man, that is not sourced very well at all. They make very bold claims about dinosaurs. They make very bold claims about Noah and the flood and all these different things as if they're just well-known facts without giving any kind of research, data points, backing to these things. And so now as an adult, I can look at those things and go, oh, okay, like maybe he wasn't such an authority on this to be talking about these things. I'm also the type of person I like research. Some of the books that uh, I've been reading and rereading, you guys know, I just finished the I Kiss Dating Goodbye series. Previous to that, on the show, I read When Religion Hurts You. One of the stark differences between books like that was that in a book like I Kiss Dating Goodbye, there's little to no sources cited other than the Bible and a couple Christian marriage books, but no backing, no like, oh, this is actually, uh, there's evidence to show that actually doing it this way leads to longer lasting marriages or healthier relationships overall. Whereas a book like When Religion Hurts You, she has a lot of things sourced there. A lot of the studies that she references, all sourced, all easily accessible for you to go and dig deeper, right? And find for yourself what you're looking for. And as someone who has a desire to like know things and learn about things, like I go down these deep, dark rabbit holes sometimes of like discovering all of this education stuff. I talked about looking up a lot of these curriculums over the last couple of days as I've been prepping for this episode. And man, oh man, I got lost in a couple dark rabbit holes of going into Reddit threads and off of, maybe starting at a Wikipedia article, but linking off and going down these rabbit holes of looking at, the histories of these education systems and where they come from. And I could bore you all day with some of that stuff, and I'm not going to do that. But again, what I find so interesting about the very religious Christian experience, homeschooling, and curriculum is again, there's a lack of perspective a lot of times. And I think that that's somewhat dangerous. It hurt me when I left home because when I got to college, I knew one way and one way only. Okay. And when I started taking classes and people didn't agree with that, even though I was at a small Christian college, um, it was hard because I was getting hit with these things that I had never, I feel like, prepared for, these questions. And also these people who I was meeting who were Christians but didn't believe in a literal 7-day creation or didn't believe that Noah's Ark was a worldwide flood, things like that. Uh, And so I had never been met with anything like that before. And so all I had was my talking point without having ever looked at any evidence for anything else. And so, again, that's not to say all of these curriculums were bad. They got me to where I needed to go a lot of times. Science probably being the weakest one of the bunch. Well, aside from Spanish, still can't really speak a lick of Espanol. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think overall decent. Okay, I'm gonna give my parents a passing grade on the curriculum when it comes to that. Let's talk about socialization a little bit. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode it was really important to my mom. Right off the rip, I remember part of us also transitioning into homeschool was the fact that we moved. So we had lived in Ventura County. Well, I guess we still technically lived in Ventura County, but we had lived in Ventura, and when I was 8, moved to Oakview. So about a 20 to 30-minute drive, depending on where you are. And yeah, it was a big shift. I was no longer going to be able to go to the same school I had been used to going to. And my mom was like, okay, let's give this homeschool thing a shot. Okay. But all of a sudden, I don't have friends. And so, how do we build those? Well, lean into church a little bit more. We got involved with a local Awana in our area, which Awana is essentially the best way to describe it for people who don't know. I think is probably it's like a mix of Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts with a game aspect to it. So imagine once a week, and also like a youth group element to it as well. So imagine once a week going to a church and you spend some time learning and memorizing Bible verses and reciting them. And based on it's like a workbook. So based on how far you get through the workbook, you earn badges similar to Boy Scouts, except these are tied to Bible and scripture memorization as opposed to actual like useful life skills that you would learn in the Scouts. And then there was a time of like games. Okay. So, and they had, I'm going to hand it to Awana. They knocked it out of the park when it comes to games. Okay. So they basically had the circle, and the circle was like a square asphalt area, and you had 4 colored teams. So it was like red, yellow, blue, green, I think I want to say. And but this circle was designed and painted in such a way that you had all of these like little markers all over the place. And so you could do laps around it. You could do there was different games we would play with like dodgeballs and things like that. You had inner and outer circles, those types of things. And so we'll play like hot lava games where the circle would creep in, and things with bean bags were very similar to like cornhole. You got to land the beanbag on a certain mark on the ground, and all these different things. Anyway, look it up. If you Google Awana and then Google like Awana like circle or something like that, it probably will come up, or Awana like activity circle or something like that. But anyway, so heavily involved in that. I met a lot of homeschool kids through that. A lot of those people have been on the show or we've chatted off air recently as we've gotten reconnected. But man, oh man, the fun times. I got to say, the games was it. But also, my parents got us involved in some rec stuff. So I played soccer for a little while, and I played tennis for a couple of years, or maybe a year. I don't know. Tennis was not my game. And did like basketball camp and things like that. The other thing that my mom did was got involved with a couple co-ops. So the 2 main ones being Group Solutions and Achieve. And Achieve, I don't think is technically a co-op. I think it's an association of homeschool families that kind of bond together to do some stuff. So, but let's talk about Group Solutions first. So Group Solutions, the basic premise of Group Solutions was meeting twice a month to give homeschool kids a little bit more of like a school like experience. And so parents would teach a class, and then kids would take it. And it was maybe 15 students per class, maybe a little bit more. And so Group Solutions taught us a bunch of different things. I took some science classes at groups. I took music lessons. We did there was a boot camp for boys class that was very kind of Boy Scout-esque. It was eventually taught by a former Boy Scout, Eagle Scout, John Slagboom, who's been on the show. Shout out, John. Um, he did another survival class. We did, I'm trying to think what else. There was cooking classes, there was sewing class, art classes, literature classes, all kinds of different aspects. Okay. And it was all these homeschool families in the Ventura County area that would come together and do this. And so I remember the first couple years doing it. It was big, but like by big, maybe a couple hundred people. And by the time we were leaving that, which was right around high school for me, they were splitting off and actually turning group solutions into like two separate town events because the homeschool group had just grown so exponentially throughout that time. And so, anyway, very cool experience. I think what was so great about that was it was an opportunity to make friends. It was also an opportunity to socialize, to have a real school environment. So we learned things like how to raise our hand in class, right? How to ask questions and how to have meaningful discussion. My mom taught English class for many years at Group Solutions, and both like British and American literature and all these different things. And she's good about creating a cool discussion group. And so we learned how to have like actual meaningful conversation around the books we were reading, as opposed to just being like, oh, I kind of like this character. It's like, well, no, tell us about that character and why that speaks to you. And so another useful skill, thank you, Mom, that came in handy when I got to college, because I could actually hold meaningful conversation around textbooks and research that we were doing, and why things stuck out and spoke to us. So shout out to that. Also shout out to the Sanchez's who put that on, because I'm sure that was a nightmare at times probably for you guys. So shout out to you guys, because that was an incredible time. And I know myself and a lot of other homeschool families appreciate the effort and the time that you spent doing that. Okay. So thank you. The other thing that we were heavily involved in was Achieve. And Achieve, like I said, was a little bit more of an association. I think it stood for the Association of Christian Home Educators of Ventura County, I think. And this was a group so it was like a membership and you would pay to be a part of it. It was exclusively for private homeschoolers, so we didn't have any public or charter school kids in that group. And it gave you access to a couple different things. So we had like park days, we did school dances, there was a spelling bee, science fair, there was like a curriculum swap or like a curriculum like yard sale type of thing. It was also a way for parents to get to know each other. And so getting like the moms together for like a mom's night out kind of a thing, and similar like for the dads and get them involved. There was, I think I said the dancing stuff already. So yeah, swing and ballroom dance, English country dance, graduations happened through Achieve. So we had actually like normal, well, quote unquote normal graduations, but more of a traditional graduation ceremony, as opposed to in the homeschool world. I'm sure there's lots of kids who their parent just hands them a diploma and it's like, here you go. No, we actually had like a ceremony with cap and gown, the progression, all that kind of stuff. And I think they would do that also for like 8th grade. So like exiting junior high and going into high school, and then exiting high school, going into college age. So yeah, a bunch inside of Achieve. As someone who had parents who served on the board of Achieve, I know that there was a lot of messiness that happened behind the scenes with that. Don't know if it still exists today or how it's changed. But I know my experience with Achieve is great. I loved it, specifically the dancing. I'm going to get into extracurriculars in a minute, but yeah, it definitely was like a big deal, and I loved it so much. It also just opened you to a network of people, which was cool, because even when I was in high school and starting my own businesses and wanting to teach guitar lessons and wanting to offer things to my community, I had this network of people that I could put that out to. And so I wasn't just like left with nothing. You know what I mean? So other co-ops and other socialization things, I kind of hit on this when I talked about my history curriculum, but my family was involved in some smaller like 3 to 4 family co-op type things where we get together for history. Or I know in high school we also kind of did small co-op things with uh, English lit, with science, those types of things where we would get together with under 10 families, but maybe a little bit more than 4, and do like our labs together for science, or do some kind of uh, like talked about discussion groups. My mom teaching that kind of a thing. So there was that. I feel like there was another subject that I'm just totally spacing on, but a lot of, particularly in the Ojai Valley, which is where all of my homeschool years happened, there was always opportunities for, someone's mom is going to teach a baking class, or someone's mom is doing this, or so and so's dad uh, wants to teach all the boys how to drive a tractor, or whatever. There was just opportunity to do things like that. And so I don't know if those would maybe 100% be labeled co-op. I'm just kind of putting that label on them to be like, there was also a lot of this kind of support system. Because as I've gotten older and I've talked a lot more to homeschool parents, it's really interesting because, like, my parents, both college educated people, my mom wanted to be an English teacher, um, kind of a thing. So she has some of the know-how for like how to do that. And I have other friends who their mom was a school teacher or went to school to be a school teacher. And so their homeschool experience is pretty, I'd say it's like pretty solid because their parent like knew what went into like managing a classroom. And then you have other homeschool parents who didn't have any of that. And I'm not saying that they gave their kid a terrible experience, but just it's interesting to see the parents that maybe only have a GED or a high school diploma became teachers and became, and homeschooled their kids, and why they did it, that kind of a thing. All that to say, it was important for the families of Ojai in particular to bond together, hopefully to help out in the weak spots that some parents had. Because even my own parents, they were not good. Science was not their area. And thankfully, we had friends who that was their area. And so we leaned into that and we used them as best we could to make that happen. So let's talk about extracurriculars a little bit. I've talked a lot on the show previously about swing dance being massive for me. And you know what's so funny about that is that I think I started dancing when I was 11 years old. And my mom stuck me in this class. And I think it was with the mindset of, Jacob's about to be a teenager and he's going to need to know how to talk to the opposite sex and to not be weird. Um, I don't know that it totally succeeded in that, but it definitely gave me an opening to like understand like that dynamic, the boy girl dynamic, I guess. And so it was cool. Definitely shout out to the Bozarth girls for teaching me how to swing dance. Shout out to John Pettit for teaching me how to swing dance. I loved it so much that I ended up taking over when they all graduated high school, and I taught dance for a number of years. But so much fun, from East Coast swing to Lindy Hop, Charleston. Learned a little bit of West Coast swing as well. Was not the homeschool community preferred East Coast swing because it's a lot more like big band kind of a thing, where West Coast swing. What's funny about West Coast swing is the reason it's called that is because it's a slot dance, and I could talk all day about this. If you want to know more, comment down below. Let me know. I'll do a whole episode on swing dance if you like. But it's a slot dance that was designed for the movies, okay? And so East Coast swing is danced in a circle. And so when the movies became big in the 1920s era, right, they needed to do they wanted to put dancing in the films, okay? And they needed dances that still showed either a person's profile or the front of a person. And so Charleston and West Coast swing became the thing. And so they turned East Coast swing slowly but surely into West Coast swing, and it became a slot dance. And so when you dance it, what I mean by that is that if you're staring directly at your partner, let's say you're my partner, okay, as we dance, when we're going to swap spots and then swap back, okay? That's what a slot dance is. And so you would always have, let's say your camera is on your left side here, pointed at you. Your profile would always be visible to the camera, whether it's your left side or your right side. Okay. Uh, East Coast, it was a circle, like I said, and so you would never end in the same spot. So sometimes back would be to the camera, and that was just not ideal. And so when they were filming movies, especially dance sequences, like I said, you needed to be able to like see the person, but also if they needed to shoot direct on, someone was having a conversation while dancing or something like that, even if they moved, they needed to make sure that person was going to end up either right back in the same spot or on the opposite side, kind of thing. And then Charleston, if you don't know what Charleston is, look it up. But Charleston is a side by side swing dance. So you hold your partner as the lead. You hold your partner with your right hand, and you basically are in an open V formation. And they would point you at the camera and tell you to boogie on down. Okay, so little history lesson, kind of a thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you swing dance people, maybe I have my facts wrong, but that's what I remember in learning swing dance type stuff. But anyway, I also brought up extracurriculars. Okay, extracurriculars. What else we had? I kind of brought up tennis and soccer and basketball. I was not a big sports person at all. I played basketball like in my neighborhood, just on the street and things like that. But I didn't like it. I was always the artsy kid, kind of a person. But I did get into airsoft, and that was so much fun, and paintball. And when I got into those things, those kind of became my sport of choice. And so me and my buddies would get together at least once a month. In the summers, it felt like we got together like every week, sometimes like all weekend long. We would play, but yeah, we would do that. Just like get outside, get dirty, roll around, have fun. You know, like an elevated Nerf battle, so to speak. And so that was a lot of fun. Obviously, I brought up like church and Awana and youth group. Those things played huge roles as extracurriculars in my life. Like the different churches that I went to, not only did I attend and was a member, but also like would serve on the worship team or sound team, lights, multimedia, children's ministry, a whole plethora of different things as well. And the same with youth group. Like not only did I like attend, but I ended up on the worship team, and then I ended up like going to junior high camp as a leader a couple times, and being on the band and stuff. So definitely like was heavily involved in those things as well. Music was like a huge extracurricular. I started playing guitar. Oh man, I want to say I was like 12 years old. Could have been a little earlier than that. I don't 100% remember, but I started. Roseanne Waltrip was my guitar teacher, and we rented a crappy guitar from her, and I would play, and I was learning scales and learning little songs here or there. And the deal was, I think it's 6 months or a year or something like that, my parents would buy me my own guitar. And I hit it, and I was like, yeah, I wanna play guitar. And they were like, are you sure? Yeah, absolutely, I want to play guitar. And so we went and bought a guitar, and I was really shy. Uh, super, super shy, to the point where I wouldn't touch the guitar in the store. Mostly, I know from me there's two aspects to this. One, I did not want to play in front of people because I didn't know if I was any good. And when you go to a little guitar store, you know, you're hearing people shred, you're hearing people who are incredible guitar players do their thing, and I knew that I wasn't that, and so I felt like I was just going to be embarrassing myself. But two, I also had this nervousness that I was like going to break it. And so I feel like I didn't want to touch anything because they weren't mine, and they're expensive, right? Guitars are crazy expensive. And so anyway, so the owner of the store, such a nice gentleman, he would play the different guitars, and I picked a guitar based on the sound that it made and what I liked. And so we found this really nice guitar, got a great discount on it. I still have it to this day. It's a beautiful, beautiful handmade guitar from Canada. And what's funny, took it home, still had not played it, pulled it out, tuned it up, played the guitar. Both my parents went, oh my gosh, Jacob can play guitar. yeah, I could play guitar. I just had been playing on a piece of trash. Um, so anyway, like I said, shout out to Roseanne Waltrip for those early guitar lessons. I then transitioned to Tim Franz. Uh, you guys know Carrie and Elia and Katrin who've been on the show, but Tim Franz was my guitar teacher for many, many years. Got me into electric guitar, taught me how to play bass, taught me how to run a studio, a lot about microphone placement and all these different things. But anyway, phenomenal guitar player and instrumentalist, absolutely incredible. But yeah, he kind of took me to that next level, and just so much fun. I loved music, and that's what I ended up going to college for originally. Was I wanted to work in the music industry. We're gonna get there in the college years in just a minute, but yeah. So music, huge part of my education. I'm also trying to think about extracurriculars. There was something else I thought of, and I cannot place what it was. I've got it. The other big extracurricular item on a lot of the homeschool families was theater. And it's so interesting because it all revolves around the Mitchell family, I think, my personal opinion. But the Mitchells would do theater in the round at their house. They had a round driveway, and right in the center, we build a stage and have plays every summer. Yeah, pretty much every summer. And they had already been doing it for a couple of years before I got involved. And like I said, I was a shy kid. So most of the time I just did backstage stuff, wear all black, go out, do my thing, change props out, whatever, not a big deal. Uh, as time went on and I got a little bit more courage, I started making my way out on the stage and singing and dancing and having fun. And what's so funny is like it's such a important memory to me because I gained so much confidence doing theater. And I never went on to do theater like in college or anywhere else other than the Mitchell's backyard, but it gave me so much confidence to just be goofy and silly and have characters and that kind of a thing. I did improv in college and like it just I had so much more confidence from having that theater background. So anyway, but I also, like I said, I loved music and I love like the entertainment industry in general. And so it was just like such a great fit. And so I think there's many of you who were my friends back in the day. You guys know the Mitchell's Backyard Theater Productions was like the place to be during the summer. And yeah, it was great. So that's kind of probably the majority of my extracurriculars. I wanted to also briefly touch on college and that experience because when I was growing up, there was this somewhat of a stigma around homeschool kids being able to get into college and what that looked like. And I think, the history of homeschooling, it took a while for it to get kind of more socially accepted and adopted in our country. And so, but I think I was really on the tail end of that where it was pretty legitimate, where my parents kept a really good record of what I did and I had transcripts and all those types of things. So for me, college wasn't really an issue as far as getting into it. Okay. I also had parents who thankfully got me the help I needed as we got closer. So I had a college guidance counselor who helped me pick out a school and figure out what I wanted to do. Because originally I was like, I'm not leaving California because why the heck would I? I'm not going to go super far away. I want to work in the entertainment industry, specifically audio engineering, and I want to make albums. I want to make music albums. Okay. Not a lot of schools do that, surprisingly. It's probably a few more, but in 2013, 2014, when I was starting to look at colleges, that was not the case. There's a big music school here in Nashville, Tennessee, called Belmont. They do that. There's a couple schools throughout the Midwest. There's a big school in Chicago, I'm blanking on the name of right now, that does it. There's Full Sail University in Florida that is not a bachelor's program. It's more of like a trade school type of thing. There's still a lot of question on if it's legitimate or not. So I knew I wanted a 4-year degree because I wanted a bachelor's to be able to fall back on if the music industry thing didn't work. Okay. But I wasn't willing to leave California. At the time, there was only 2 schools, I think, in California that were offering what I was looking for. One was a master's college, and one was a state school, and I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, but what was so funny was I had all these other criteria that I wanted to meet. Okay. I was really scared of going to a big school because, well, I wasn't used to being in a classroom with a lot of people. I like the smaller, intimate settings. So they're like, okay, that's big school's probably going to be out. Okay. So there was that. The second thing was my guidance counselor was like, okay, well, I think you need to start looking outside of California because you're starting to put your eggs all in one basket, which was the master's college. And thankfully, they were just like, why don't you just apply to some of these other schools? Because at the very least, even if you don't go to them, you can get the financial aid offer, and then you can use them against, you can use the colleges against each other to get the best offer possible. And I was like, okay. So I started applying, applied to Greenville College, applied to a school in like Iowa and some other school in the Midwest, and I think somewhere in Colorado potentially. Just like kind of spread myself a little thin. And some of them didn't really have totally the degree I was looking for, but maybe had something adjacent to it. And surprise, surprise, got into every single school I applied for. I am not a smart person, by the way. Okay. Not super smart, did very average on my SATs and ACT scores. I got into every school I wanted. And I got two schools that offered me really good packages where I was like, okay, I'd be kind of dumb not to. And yeah, so anyway, we did it down, ended up in Illinois, went to college. It was both the best 3 years of my life and the worst 3 years of my life, for varying reasons. But college was really crazy because it was the first time I'd ever really been on my own. And it was the first time I didn't have friends. And two things that were, I think, big and important was one, I chose not to identify as a homeschool kid right off the bat. It came out probably at the end of my freshman year, and it's not like I lied to people. If people asked, I would just say it. But I didn't. If someone was like, "Oh, tell me about your education," I'd be like, "Oh, I went to private school in California, small private school in California," kind of a thing. As opposed to saying, "Oh, I was homeschooled," that kind of a thing. And so I did that. And then the other thing was that I learned that my socialization skills were kind of crap. Um, I was used to being around homeschool kids, and we're a bunch of weirdos. And I mean that in the best possible way, ever. But um, we are a couple weirdos. And so I'm thankful I had a college professor who was like, you need to learn to chill out. Okay. You need to like tone it down. You're at an 11, bring it down to like a 6, or a 5, and just like chill. Just like be cool, be in the room. And especially if you want to work in the entertainment industry, it's all about like, can you hang? Which is very true. Still remains true to this day. Okay. Can you be a good hang? And so, anyway, college was great. Gave me some great friends. Met my wife. It was tough. Classes were hard. I'll tell you that right now. I got like my first like B's and C's in college, and I was like, oh man, I got a D in college. Somehow still graduated. Uh, but yeah, it it woke me up, I think, to a lot of things. It was this big shift in my life where I started thinking for myself in a lot of ways, and at the tail end of it, I definitely I had definitely changed. Okay. And what I mean by that is when I talked earlier about my curriculum and it teaching a very one-sided perspective, I walked out of college really feeling open to a lot of different things, which is crazy considering I went to a small Christian college that very much like it was a Methodist college, I think United Methodist. So we had a lot of rules around everything we could and couldn't do. We had a lot of our teaching was very much still based in like a Christian aspect. I took religion class. I took an Old Testament class. I had Bible class. I went to church. I served at church. It was mandatory that we go to chapel like 3 days a week, be in Bible studies and all this different stuff. But I think what it taught me, one of the big things that I woke up to in college was the fact that, like, even though a lot of the people there were Christians, we believed vastly different things. and it was okay to ask questions of each other. And it was like this safe environment to kind of do that. And we would disagree on a lot of stuff. And I had a buddy who's like, he was a Calvinist, and I was non-denominational with more of an emphasis in like a Baptist background, um, kind of a thing. And so if you're not religious and you don't know anything about, like, there's Christianity, and then within Christianity there's all these little subgroups of what's going on. um it is crazy church drama inside of there, and there's crazy just like little tweaks that people make, and do. It's their interpretation of the Bible, right? It's their interpretation of religion and the history of religion and all these different things that set us on these paths of like, I must identify with this and I must identify with that, and that kind of a thing. And I think that's great. That's wonderful that we can be that way. But like I said, I think college gave me that freedom finally to like ask, in a lot of senses, dumb questions of people and be like, okay, so why do you believe that? And because I started getting asked that question a lot. And it made me realize that I was like, oh, maybe I need to actually like think about these things more than just like my pastor told me this, or my mom and dad told me this, or this was my understanding of what the Bible said. And kind of look at actually like, some theological evidence for those things. And so that served me well, because when I left college and I was out in the real world, then you really start to come across vastly different world beliefs. And as I got my first jobs and I started asking people questions and all these different things, I've always thankfully worked in environments that the people I work with are very open about what they believe, and they're very willing to talk, and they're very accepting of who you are as a person and that kind of a thing. And so it also set a very hopefully good standard for me to be the same way to people and say, okay, let me just like meet you where you're at and ask questions, and that's cool. So anyway, I could rant and rave about that all day, of like that transition away from Christianity and in my belief system and things like that. But I already made an episode on that in my Why I Deconstructed, and I've talked pretty extensively on this podcast about it. But all of these things to be said, okay, I'm now officially 10 years, no, 12 years. Oh my gosh, 12 years out of homeschool, okay, or coming up on 12 years out of homeschool. And I still look back on it very fondly. I still look back on it, and it's one of those things where if someone comes to me and they're like, I'm thinking about homeschooling my kid, or, maybe I'm just like, exploring education options, I will talk about it from a very fond perspective, because I had a great time. I learned a lot of really incredible things that I don't think I would have learned in public school. I also missed some important things that I probably would have gotten in public school. But overall, I came out okay. I survived. I survived college. I've survived, almost a decade out of college now. Dang, that's crazy. And I'm alive. I'm thriving. My career has been what it's been. Like I have done the thing. I have succeeded in a lot of senses. And so anyway, so like I said, when people come to me and they're talking to me, the things that I point out to them are like, to me, the reason that I'm successful is because my parents advocated for me having the education that I needed to succeed. When I struggled in something, they helped find a new curriculum or a new way of teaching it that made sense to me and my sister. Okay. When, when I had questions, they didn't always steer away from every little thing. And sometimes they did, but they would encourage us to research and to learn things and to ask questions. And when I say that, it could mean a lot of different things. It could obviously mean religion, but I'm thinking more in the sense of when I was really into something specific, like music, and really got into like John Mayer or Eric Clapton or something like that, wanting to learn the history of those people and what they've played and the styles and their teachers and all those types of things. Like, my parents gave me the tools and the resources to get that knowledge. And so it gave me a deep appreciation for learning, and it gave me a deep, like, wanting to learn. And so anyway, I still hold that to this day. So I think that that's more important And that's why I say I think my parents were great advocates for me and my sister as students, because they gave us the tools. They saw where we were lacking, and they helped give us the tools we needed to make it. Okay. So that to me is the more important thing as someone who's looking at like the best education style for their kid is like, well, where's your kid at and what does your kid need? Because it might be public school because they're like super social butterfly, need to be around people 24/7 kind of a person. Or maybe they're more introverted and school is overwhelming, right? The big classroom setting is overwhelming. So, like, looking at those different things is important. The other thing that I say to those people is like, why do you want to do this? Is it selfish or not? And I think there's a vast majority of people who I think do it for selfish reasons. They want their kid to be, and I don't know that they would argue that it's a selfish reason, but they want their kid to turn out maybe just like them, or to be protected from all these different things, and not go through hardships, which I don't think is like totally always a bad thing. And like I said, it's kind of painted in this light of like, it's for you, kind of a thing. But what is your motivation for doing it? Because it sometimes is selfish. But if you can come at it from a non-selfish place, if you can come at it, like I said, from wanting to give your kid the best possible education possible. I'm using possible a lot. Can you tell? But maybe it's stemming from a good place. So anyway, I've rambled probably long enough at this point on my homeschool experience. And yeah, I hope that's cleared up maybe some questions that people have around it. If you got more, let me know. I'd love to answer them. And yeah, I'm trying to think. Anything else? You got anything? Okay, good. I guess it's just me. This has been fun. It's always fun chatting with you guys. And yeah, do all of the internet things that you know how to do. Share the show with someone that you love, someone you care about. Leave me a comment, leave me a like. Do whatever you feel comfortable doing to help get the show out to more people. Remember, subscribe to the newsletter. Link is in the description. It's the top one in the description. Just do it. It costs you nothing. If you don't want to get the emails, but you have a burner email account, put your burner email account in there, okay? And yeah, and if you want to get a hold of me, you know how to do that. You can either email me at exhsclub@gmail.com, or you can shoot me a DM at EXHS on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. Yeah, that's where I'll be. So until next week, we'll see ya. All right. Peace.